My name is Paul A. Pavlou. I serve as Dean of the Miami Herbert Business School. It's a great pleasure tonight to have a special host. Usually we have a CEO leadership series, and today we don't have a CEO with us, unfortunately. We have a lead goose. And that's his actual title in the organization. And it's a very fascinating organization. And in my previous job, I had the pleasure of spending 10 years in Philadelphia. And that's the place that Wawa has made its history over 200 years. And a very fascinating corporation, over 200-year history, that actually places employees as part of, and their associates as part of their ownership structure, a very strong culture of serving customers, and a very strong emphasis on the customer. So we're going to hear today from the lead goose, or in parentheses, the CEO of Wawa. So I'm going to ask Chris Gheysens to join me here for a conversation. But I hope you had a chance outside. We still have quite a few Wawa materials, and I brought my own stuff here. So a very famous company that currently has 260 stores here in Florida and growing. And so we hope to see much more presence coming here in South Florida as part of its expansion plans. Chris, please join me, and thank you very much for coming. I hope you got this book, and I was quite fascinated. And let me just read. I don't like to read much, in general, but now with ChatGPT and AI, we don't need to read or know anything.
That's true. That's true.
But some of the things are more. What kind of a company shares ownership with thousands of its associates and puts its CEO, the lead goose, at the bottom of its organizational chart? What kind of business believes that fulfilling lives is more important than filling orders? What kind of culture helps customers become fast friends and associates become like family? So which one, Chris?
That's all true. That was the former CEO, so I have to live up to that, I think. But yes, it's a pretty amazing culture. But and some of this, let's be honest, is a bit aspirational at times. But that's what we strive for each and every day. So, 2 million people a day visit Wawa, roughly. And, one of our, and we'll get into culture, I'm sure, Paul, quite a bit. One of our missions, when you try to boil it down for 50,000 people that are, your employees, as we call associates, is the challenge of make that the best 3 to 5 minutes that person's going to have in their day. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. We can talk about that too, but it goes directly into lessons from the flock in this book, and I do think we have extras. It's really a well done little monograph of just stories that represent us and our culture and how we think and approach business.
What attracted you to Wawa?
So after college, which now feels like a long time ago, and I'm in a university setting. I went into public accounting at a firm, Deloitte, and I had a number of clients. And the nice thing about that was you're really able to see a lot of different business models, a lot of different business types, and for me also culture, because you're embedded in the company, in the building, in their headquarters for sometimes months at a time. And Wawa pretty quickly, like luck of the draw, was a client. I went into the retail industry part at Deloitte, so I had a lot of retail type clients, but there was something different about Wawa. Not the business so much, but what happened and how the culture and how they treated people inside was pretty unlike. Retail's a low margin business, so it can be a little grind and gritty at times, but it wasn't really like that at Wawa. So I had the opportunity a number of years after being at Deloitte to join a role in accounting at Wawa, and I never looked back. So that was 27 years ago.
Wow,
yeah,
excellent. Well, actually, we are going to talk about Wawa, but tell us, because we have a lot of students here, and we aspire to also become CEO, not lead goose.
Yep.
So tell us, like 27 years brought you from, I guess, in accounting, moving from Deloitte, another prestigious company. Tell us kind of a little bit about your life story and what took you to that lead role. Oh, the bottom of the chart.
Yes, yeah, and that's sort of how we operate. And I think it's right for a service-oriented company to operate like that. But I got an accounting degree at a similar prestigious school, if you will, at Villanova, and started at Deloitte, like you know. But at Wawa, I never today, I've been nice enough to spend a little time with Adam, who I know from home, who was a student here, and Nicholas I met today, and I can tell they probably have life a little bit more planned out already than I probably do at 53 years old, or certainly did when I graduated college. I didn't leave Deloitte or even Villanova thinking I'd be a CEO. When I got into the corporate world, I'll be honest, I struggled a bit at Deloitte. Back then, there wasn't really a good set of programs that universities have done so much better on matriculating into the workforce from the college world and life. And I grew up with 3 older brothers and a father, all who were in very small business, and worked with them in high school. And so like corporate America was a little bit foreign to me, and read into that politics and personalities and drama and things like that. But I figured that out over time, and when I got to Wawa in an accounting role, it was really about learning process. So I went from accounting at big companies, working with pretty senior individuals, to really my first job at Wawa was with clerks. And their job was, we just had computer systems, was to get the weekly accounting, because retail is always on weekly accounting. Over the weekend, they'd get all the bills and invoices. We'd process the bills. And I was the first one on Monday evening to know what happened last week in the business from a financial perspective. And so that, I realized pretty quickly, was power. Knowledge is power. And so I used that to go and meet with our chief marketing and our chief operating officer. And I said, look, here's the report, here's how we did last week, and they always want to know, and created relationships that way. Our chief marketing officer at the time was the individual who wrote this book, who ended up becoming a mentor of mine because of that. And if he were here, he'd say, hey, I wasn't good on the financial side, you were, and he was better on the marketing side, and so he taught me. But I really was just learning my way through the company. I had an opportunity to create our first planning and analysis team that centralized our analytics for Wawa and implemented our first fuel accounting system when we got into the fuel business in the mid-90s. So was involved in a lot, but I was always struck with how our work in accounting didn't so much show up on a financial statement, but how it impacted operations and what happened across hundreds of stores. So I took a liking to that. I ended up going into the field a lot, into stores, and teaching them about the income statement, or how what they did at store level manifested on the income statement, and that was powerful. I had an opportunity in 2007 to become CFO, and honestly, at that point, Paul, I thought I made it. I said I went and got my accounting degree. I'm in the #1 finance role in a company. And here we are, and I was 35 years old and felt like, boy, and loved the company. We were growing. A couple years after that, the CEO, Howard at the time, came to me and said, I don't think you're done. Your career's not over. You got a lot more left in you, and I think you could be in this seat one day. And I was surprised he said that. So unbeknownst to me and the company at the time, he had told the board that he had a short tenure left as CEO, and they went through a succession process, and in 2011, I was appointed as the next president and CEO. And it was a wild process, very interesting. It was run what I would say an old-fashioned process. You wouldn't run it that way now, and that was, we really didn't know what was going on, but there were 2 of us internally that they basically split the company up in half. Gave half to me, half to him, in essence, and said, best person wins. And it was pretty fascinating. So I was lucky enough to come out of that, and been in this role now for 12 years plus. But it could have been very different. There's, you always think about a career, and there's so many little points that you could have done something differently or approached something in another way, and your career would have taken a different turn. So read that there was a lot of luck involved in a lot of this. And it wasn't just the grand plan when I graduated, say I'm going to be a CEO of a big company one day. It's just the way it sort of worked out.
Yeah. Actually, it's a good point about, I guess, I would say the importance of luck, and I'd say like in business it's an inexact science still. So obviously luck plays a role both individually, organizationally.
Sure.
We had a speaker last night actually talk about, in real estate, you have to get lucky a little bit, but I still say you have to be prepared. Yes, and luck favors the more prepared ones than the unprepared ones. So financial crisis, you said, old-fashioned way, split the company, see how well you're doing. I'm sure there's an element of luck, there is some uncertainty out there, but if you are well prepared individually, organizationally, more chances you'll succeed.
Absolutely,
so,
absolutely.
But Wawa has been always an amazing growth story, and which is kind of, usually the growth is associated with the efficiencies, not so much a culture of great customer service. How do you balance the two? Amazing growth, and you've seen some of the growth here in South Florida and other parts of the country, of course, but how do you manage that growth and continuous emphasis on the culture and quality?
It's really difficult. I'm not going to lie. There's no formula. I've rearranged my team in the last couple of years to give me personally more time and accountability to focus on just nurturing culture as we undergo what will be the biggest growth trajectory we've had. When we came to Florida in 2012, we opened our first store. You have to understand Wawa contextually at that point in time was a company of about 600-700 stores in just a handful of states, all within a 3.5-hour drive of our corporate headquarters. And so we are very high touch culture. It is not unusual for me to be in meetings from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. without a break. Very high in-person culture and very high commitment to our stores and the associates or general managers who run a store. And so if someone called from Virginia or Philadelphia, it wasn't unusual for somebody in the corporate office to get in a car and go right to the store to help them. So when we went to Florida, it was this, that there was a bit of a cultural concern of, well, geez, that you can't just jump on a plane and be in a store in Miami in just a couple hours. It's going to take long. How does this all work? And boy, is growth more important than culture? And I would say growth in a much more rapid manner for us could be an enemy of culture. But there's, at least our culture, there's a couple things you have to understand. One, we don't acquire stores, so the convenience store industry is really highly fragmented. A lot of players go into it and they're rolling up convenience stores because it's so fragmented. We build every single one. We operate every single one of our stores, so 1,100 stores. So we like control is what I would say over the whole experience and what's happening inside the store and the point of contact with a customer. So by definition, we're growing a little bit more slowly. For us, that means 50 new stores a year. This year, we'll do 70 new stores a year. Next year, we'll get close to 100 new stores a year. So a few years ago, as our business has grown, we want to take a step up in trajectory of new store growth. We're going to go from 6 states, Florida being our most recent, to we've already entered 2 this year, and we'll enter 4 next year that are new. So if you think about it, it took us 60 years in the convenience business to get to the first 6 states. The next 6 states are going to take 2 years, Midwest and more. So culture for us, it starts with people. And so when we think about growth, and we really did this down here in a different, unique way, we ask people to relocate to open up our stores. And not just anybody, but our best people leaders as we assess them. So not necessarily the best operators, the best money makers in our stores, but the people leaders that we know will set up the culture, will really bring life and breath to the farm system they're going to create as we start to enter a new market, whether it's Florida, North Carolina, or others. So that paid a lot of dividends for us. And Florida, thank you. It's not hard to get people to want to move from the Northeast to relocate to Florida. So That's a big element, and we still have high touch. I'm in the state a lot. We have leaders that are in the state a lot, so the most senior team, or pretty flat organization, 1 or 2, 3 of our vice presidents are assigned that they sort of own Florida with the operations team, so they're expected to be here very frequently. And that's all about, again, making sure that that culture of people first, high touch, listening, big element of our culture, and making sure that we're doing the right things in the corporate office, founded on what's going on in our stores, no matter the market. That's all really a big part of our culture. We do a lot of other things. Years ago, the caring part of our business is really important. So Paul, we had a firm come in and they did a cultural study. And I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to studies and research, and many companies use engagement surveys to say what their culture is. Engagement surveys measure satisfaction, which is a cousin to culture, but not culture. There's another firm that we were really impressed with, and they came in. They actually have 8 elements of culture based on observed and learned behaviors. They surveyed and observed our company for quite a long time, and the culture, the 2 elements of our culture, which are somewhat contradictory on their spectrum, are highly caring and highly results oriented. And so, on both fronts, we hold ourselves really accountable. We're high performing, continuous learning, continuous improvement. On the other side, we really strive to take care of people. So my predecessor, a little story, back in 2005, we had a really tough year financially. I was not CFO, but right under the CFO. And we went out and visited Southwest Airlines. They had this group that sort of took care of their pilots and their associates in unique and different ways that we hadn't seen. Our CEO at the time came back and he created that group. We called it Internal Care, and we created a separate 501c3 nonprofit organization called Associates in Need Fund, and we funded that. And that was there just to help our associates when they hit a speed bump in life. Unexpected death, and they can't cover the costs, or something happens in a relationship and they find themselves without a home, and many things like that. Or you have a hurricane and you can't work for a few days. And so I remember we went into the board meeting. This was one of those moments you're like, wow, like it was eye-opening, epiphany, and I'm at the right place type of moment. And I remember we had a really good turn to the second half of the year. We did amazing things in the marketing expense control front, and we made our plan that year when it looked very bleak early in the year. And we went into the board, and the chairman at the time, and I don't know why, I don't recall why I was in the room, but he's talking about the CEO, Howard, and he said he did the most amazing thing this year that I think will be one of the most monumental and set us on a trajectory. And I'm sitting there thinking he's going to say, well, he turned around the financials, and he goes, he started this group called Internal Care, and he talked about it to the board of directors. And I sat there and I'm like, and he didn't even mention the financial results. And trust me, we're pretty financial oriented, results oriented. And I sat there, I said, oh my gosh, at this level, this is what matters most. This is an amazing place. And because the company invested quite a bit of money, that group exists today. They have taken care of countless number of associates. And just with the recent storm, we've already helped just since then 1,400 Wawa families with, sort of no questions asked. If you need a $500 gift card for food because you lost power for a few days, if you needed to get out of the path of Hurricane Milton, you needed hotel assistance, we took care of it. So all those things are happening, and that's a unique thing. So the point is you build institutions that help foster culture even as you're growing, and it gets bigger than just one person or a group of leaders. So we have plenty of those types of institutions across the company.
Yeah, very impressive, yes. That's and you also have a very strong kind of social culture as well, giving to the community, so you're part of the community. Being in Philadelphia was something that Wawa was known part of the community.
Yeah.
I hope you're also becoming, part of the South Florida community, but please tell us about your connection to the community and helping communities thrive.
The best part of corporate culture, in my opinion, is when it's built from the bottom up. And when you think about CEOs or lead goose, when they impugn things from the top, and our culture for 60 years in retail, and really even before that when we were a dairy, there was always this culture of supporting the community in unique ways. We try to do it in our business. We're the last to close, first to open when a storm like Milton hits. So we need to be there for the community. But specifically, we have one of the larger foundations. So in 2014, what I recognize is what's beautiful about the bottom up is you have so many different charitable, nonprofit community organizations, thousands of them that we're supporting either through volunteer efforts or philanthropic gifts. We ended up creating the Wawa Foundation in 2014, and we had a goal to give back $50 million to our communities in 5 years, and we smoked through that goal in 3 years. And that's been a big mainstay to what our brand is about, and it fits into that core purpose and our culture of just giving back. So that caring element of our culture, yes, it's internal, but we really have a strong ethos of you have to care for the communities because it's centered in the core purpose of fulfilling lives every day. And we can talk about that at length, but it's in this belief that we play a role in the community that we serve. And we understand our role. We're not trying to be bigger than what we are, but that ultimately connected communities, and Wawa can be that town hall at times, are healthier and better place and create stronger communities. And that's sort of the role that we play. And that means we got to help outside of our four walls. Just a few years ago, I created, with our chairman at the time, a new committee on our board of directors. And so from a board perspective, we operate like a public company. We take the best of a public company, the operations and governance, and use that, and the quarterly stuff we don't worry a whole lot about. So we have a committee called Social Purpose and Culture Committee at the board level. And so that helps us understand our pillars of strategy in the community, as well as our pillars of strategy inside the culture of our company and the investments we make. So we, even in our strategic planning as a management team, think about culture and think about community as elements of our strategic plan. That's not highly unique today, but I think for us, the governance structure around it is, and that's pretty powerful when you can align a board of directors down to the person making your sandwich, that we're in a company that has a greater responsibility than just our bottom line. So.
Actually, for those, I guess, like Manos were from Houston, H-E-B, the supermarket store in Texas.
Yes,
and,
wonderful.
Very similar kind of
Yes.
culture. I mean, I knew the previous CEO very well and the current one as well. Very similar structure, both internally, a lot of caring for the employees, and similar kind of retail, kind of supermarket, but a lot to, and also community-wise, the foundation. So
it's funny you say that. Next Friday, I have a just recently retared executive from H-E-B that's visiting to join our board of directors.
Okay.
Because of that.
Okay.
So, yes.
Who is that person? Maybe I know him.
I don't want to say it quite yet. I'll tell you offline.
All right. Okay. But it's very similarities as well. Another thing I struck me as well, it was the servant leadership model. Yeah. And of course, many CEOs say that because it sounds good and very modest, but to actually live this is another thing. So tell me how is that you operationalize it in practice?
And no, you're right. And I'm a leadership journey in process all the time, Paul. I don't profess to have arrived even in this role. So the term's coined by Robert Greenleaf. There's a book that's founded a bunch in Christianity, which is great, personally important to me, but our belief around it takes those principles and evolves them a bit. We actually took a building on our campus and reshaped it into the Servant Leadership Training Center. So we have customized training, another university, not as prestigious, that helped us build out. So everyone in one of their, what we call turns on their leadership journey, will spend time there no matter where they are. I was just with a group that many of them were from Florida, and we teach a lot of the principles that they can apply depending on where they are in their leadership journey. So for me, it comes down to the basics of values. And so, why I think I've been successful at Wawa, why I don't look at it as work and think of it just as an integrated part of my life, is because values and their leadership model that was really there before I arrived is really who I am as well. So, there's a lot of sayings we have around it, one of which is, our roles might be different in the company, but our status is all the same. There's all the little things, which I think now seem so obvious, but, there's no executive dining room. There's no special parking. I think Adam, when he interned for us, had a better parking spot than me most days. So, and open door policy, and the real belief that in its essence, you're not there to lead because of your agenda or your ego. You're there to lead, to gain followership, to make sure that other people's obstacles and challenges are removed so they can grow and achieve more. And that's hard, because as we've learned on our journey over a number of years, some leaders earlier in their career, they interpret that as, I can't have resolve, I can't be strong-willed, I can't manage performance because I'm just sort of in the background. And that was honestly a challenge for us early on as we really got into this. You saw some performance indicators, and so when you talk to leaders, what we found was this sense of they were leading from the back and not from the front. And there's a nuance with servant leadership. You're still leading from the front. You still have to make sure that you have strong performers and manage performance and talent, but at the same time, it's not just leading without looking behind to make sure people are there right alongside of you. And so, it's been an evolution for us, but in a service-oriented business, and I don't know that every culture, that model of leadership would work, but in a service-oriented business where we're asking 50,000 associates to serve 2 million people a day, it feels really appropriate for me to be serving them and those associates to make their job and the paying customer's job easier and better. So,
I guess from a leadership perspective, to make the argument for you is that, if you help everybody, all of your associates, to do their job better, you actually get the credit as the leader. Because they will do a better job, the company will do better, they will service those 2 million people every day. So helping every single employee doing his or her job better helps you in your leadership role. So that's a very important part.
It is. And listening is a big part of it. And so we have lots of listening posts. One, we're in the stores a lot. And we don't go to stores. It's funny, sometimes they'll think, oh my God, he's coming in, everything's got to be perfect. He's going to be looking at a sheet of paper. It's talk to every associate, understand what's going on in their life, understand what's happening at Wawa, what we can do, what we're doing. Usually I ask them the question, what are we doing at corporate that's driving you crazy right now? Because we're not perfect. We have a lot of change going on all the time. And usually you get quite a bit of, oh, okay, you really want to know? And then we have a voice of the associate process where either in their microphone or on their phones, they can send us advice, they can send us observations, and we have a team that's listening to that. And honestly, we go out into the stores and have big meetings and share what they've told us and how we've made change and what the impact is. And it's amazing. When you can take 50,000 people and excite them around innovation and idea creation, you can do quite a bit.
Yeah, kind of a different model, but we had the CEO of Subway a few weeks back, and kind of said the innovation actually happens in the stores. They're individually owned by kind of professional, quite a different model than you, but still, they're associates of different type, if they're franchise different, but the innovation in the stores happen bottoms up, rarely from the corporate side. Corporates on the quality side, make sure there is some kind of consistency, which I guess is part of your accountability part of the job.
It is.
But hearing what the people on the ground, they feel, and what products sell, what people ask for, so the listening part is very important.
It's key. Years ago, our coffee business was made because of an associate at store level said, this person is coming in, this is years ago, and they wanted them to make coffee. They don't want to make it at home anymore. And they're like, we should do that. And they bought a pot of coffee and started without corporate even knowing. That wouldn't fly today, but that's where innovation is. We have a whole innovation center, as most people do and companies do on campus, but they're trying to engineer things differently. And even they're learning from our stores. Because if you think about, we have one of our larger expenses is labor. And so if we can shave a minute of labor out of a store every week, it's worth, like $1 million a year to us. So they were constantly looking at the engineering of each work cell. And if it's one less step, one less bend motion, one less reach, that can add up over time. And a lot of our engineers they do wonderful things. They build stores out, they run scripts, they they get I love going over. They'll bring in associates to run a store that's on our campus, a fake store they built out that they've changed. And the associates in like the first 5 minutes, as many of the engineers are sitting there for weeks building this and all, they're like, trash cans in the wrong spot. Or that shouldn't be there, it's gotta go. And they're like, huh? And they're like, they flip like, oh, you see the engineers. That's the moment you're like, yeah, that cashier and that hoagie maker, they really do make a difference. And the engineers got to listen. So it's fun. That's the fun part of the job.
So we started talking about like digital transformation. That was a very big part of companies, and of course the latest trend on AI. And so what are your thoughts kind of on the future of the service industry and kind of future of Wawa? How do you see technology, AI, how you define it, changing that culture of people first, high touch, because the two things are kind of, you can come up with solutions that you can use AI instead of cashiers, and it's probably very easy to do and probably save you a few $1 million. But is it something you see the future going that direction?
It will, because the generation today, the younger generations, they're clearly giving us signals that the Amazon experience is expected no matter what. It's got to be super easy, got to be super frictionless. And so we spend a lot of time, and I'm not going to tell you we've cracked the code on how do we balance that and still having that personal connection, which we think is important in service and important to people. So two seminal moments over the last 25 years. One, 25 years ago, we put in touch screens. So you used to walk up to someone at the counter and say, I want a turkey hoagie with this, this, and this on it, and they'd write it on a piece of paper, and they get about a third of it right, 2/3 of it wrong. They get a turkey hoagie, they get home, and not really what they wanted. And so we changed that to a touch screen. And we sort of lucked out because one, it allowed us to get on a trend of personalization and customization. And two, then Apple showed up with an iPad years later, and so touch screen became a thing. That was a big barrier. Our customers and some of our associates that were ruining the company. It is now just part of our standard operating procedure. We couldn't go back. Our menu is so complex. This isn't if you haven't been in a Wawa, number 1, 2, or 3, it is you can make a sandwich or a quesadilla or 500 other things with 38 different ingredients on it any way you like. So that's an important element because of speed as well. So speed, and then what happens when actually the screen says all the right things? You make your orders accurately as well. So that, and then we did go the self-checkout route in some of our checkouts during COVID. It was just seemed like a necessity. I question that at times if that was the right decision, but and on the digital front, the service model will be changed. I think it's just going to become such an important part of what the generation wants that's growing in economic power, that when they're going to spend their money, and I think this is across convenience, but every business, they want you to know them before they walk in your store. And they don't want you to know them because you've been there. They think electronically, like an online experience, that should happen in brick and mortar. Technology has to help play that role, and we've started down some of that. And when they get inside your store, by knowing them means you know exactly what I want, or you should, and you should be able to tell me some things maybe I didn't expect but are going to be really relevant to me. So you're seeing marketing on the retail side come to a one-to-one relationship, even in brick and mortar, and digital data loyalty is all surrounding how to make that happen. So it's a lot of us are still trying to figure it out. The race right now for every retailer is building the size of your loyalty database, because our fear is, so what do you think the number one place, if you don't shop at a Wawa, what your consideration set is? If you don't go to a Wawa for lunch, where do you think the average person goes? Sheets in some markets. If you don't know Sheets, they're a little smaller and crappier than us. I mean, sorry. McDonald's. Thank you.
Subway.
McDonald's, actually Subway, yes, but not nearly as much. So McDonald's, if it's morning, it's Dunkin', which is much more popular up north, and even Starbucks. So it depends on the daytime, but McDonald's. So the fear I have is McDonald's has a very powerful loyalty program. And if I have a customer who's in their loyalty program and mine, if they're better at loyalty, they're better at data analytics, they're better at understanding my customer, they're going to market to my customer. and I say my in the nicest way, better than I can. And that is a really dangerous world. And so all of us are rushing to understand customer behaviors in a way that really I can serve up the best meaningful offer to you at the time that you want it, in the way that you want it, that's most relevant. And that's marketing, at a really high level. It is very hard to do. We've invested tens of millions of dollars into a loyalty program. We have 3.5 million active users of our about 20 million sort of customers that use Wawa. So it's really hard to do. And at the same time, AI is going to get in there, and it's going to help with those. It's going to take that to a whole new level, because this is a lot of manual analytics. Right now, we're running probably 15 different A/B tests, which are you and Adam look a little bit alike in your behaviors. So I'm going to give Adam one test, you another. We'll create cohorts, and we'll just watch to see which one's better. Yeah. That's pretty much what we're all doing. AI will probably be able to predict that before even having to do it. So, digital's a big part. We underwent with our digital transformation the hardest part. We were a buy and implement shop. With our digital transformation in the last 5 years, we've now gone from design, build our own software for much of what is customer facing. So that touch screen now is all our own code and our own programmers. And we wanted to own that entry point for our customers because of the data, but also because we can move to market much more quickly. When someone else owned it, it was literally, you want a new product to go on that screen, it'll take 6 months to create all the code around it. We can do that now in 6 days. So speed to market's really important around all of that. So yes, it's been a costly but beneficial, and we're still in the early part of that J curve.
Yeah, no, very impressive. You also have your own software. That's not the easiest way to go from.
It is not.
I guess we have a few more minutes. So my last question, and then we'll open up to the audience for questions. So we have students here. So what advice would you give students as they enter the business world, like similar to what you had done 27 years ago, and with a very clear focus how to become the lead goose?
Lead goose, sure. Well, a few things. So I'm on a board at another university, so I speak with students often, and then certainly in my professional life, we hire quite a few and interact. And one, terribly impressive. You as a group, and it's always dangerous to talk in groups of any body, but I would say that you got your act together. I think the world's going to be in a great place as the students today get into the business world, civic world, wherever they end up. Few things that I would tell you. One, master what's in front of you when you get into the business world. What I see sometimes is the trap of, I'm in this job, but I'm worrying about the next job already. Master what's in front of you would be my first advice. Be great at the job description you have, and when you're great at that, look at the job next to you, both behind you and in front of you, and try to offer as much assistance and understanding and support at all times to everyone in a process, if you will. But master what you're great at. Don't ever be afraid to look at lateral moves in an organization, even maybe at a midpoint in your career, even if you think you're on a trajectory. The higher, in my experience, the higher you go in an organization, no matter the culture, no matter the business, the more of a broad-based player you are, the better you're going to be as a broad-based leader. So, it'd be unusual today in a lot of companies for a CFO to be an accountant, and then an analyst, and then an accounting manager, and then a controller, and then CFO. Usually CFOs have multidiscipline background, and you can say that for COO, for CMO. It's unusual that you come straight up. I would encourage you at the right point and turns in your career to look for opportunities that sometimes might feel like a step back, could be a lateral move, but it changed my career from going from finance into operations. And I think that really can be powerful for you. It'll pay dividends later, even though in the short term it might look like foregoing a promotion opportunity. And the last I would just say is, you're going to learn after you graduate, and hopefully, from your youth, from a university like this, and after you graduate, you're building your own value set. You're going to have to test and learn what that really is about deeply, and get to know yourself. And really you have to get to know the organizations you work for and the people you work for. And you're going to learn through that journey who you are and what you stand for. And I would work like heck to find a company that aligns to your own personal values. That's solely the reason why I've been successful and stayed at Wawa. No one wants to leave work and have a different public voice than what they had sitting at their desk or in an office. Or you don't want your private voice internally to be different and misaligned from the public voice. And when you do that, you know you're not being your authentic self. If you can be your authentic self and your values can come to life in work, you will find that you will be your best self and you're in the right place. So, and that, folks, I would tell you in my own career, that takes trial and error. That takes trial and error to learn who you really are. And some of you might work great in an organization and culture like Wawa. Some of you might be too directive, too fast-paced, too type A, whatever it is. None of those are bad. But that might work very better at a different company and different culture. Aligning and figuring that out in your first 5-10 years, because it might take you that long in your professional career, I think is probably your most important job to figure out where to land long term. There's some.
All right, so I guess we have questions, and we have 2 microphones. So there's a lady here in the front. So you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll get you a mic. So please.
Hello, thank you, Dean Pablo, and thank you for coming to speak to us.
Sure thing.
So before I ask my question, I think I may have the answer to your fear that you had that you spend tens of millions of dollars on. So we'll talk about that later. Okay. Because I'm not going to just spill all my secrets here.
Good. You're hired.
So we'll see. We'll talk about it. You touched on a lot of things. So I wanted to ask specifically about leadership and what it means to you and how you've improved since you were younger to now being a leader, how you have improved being in that role.
Sure.
And developing not only your company currently right now, but also yourself as a person and knowing yourself, and how you talked about alignment and how that's important. And what would be the skills and qualities that are most essential to your success thus far? My name's Daphne Lavazas, by the way.
Nice
Hello.
to meet you. Thank you for the question. Hello. So how have I improved as a leader? I would tell you, I actually thought about this morning. You really always have to be super self-aware. So the best leaders, research speaking, not Chris, everyone's really smart. You're going to see and interact with a lot of really smart people. That's sort of table stakes. There's degrees, sometimes uber smart, and that's great. Emotional intelligence is actually research-based, the largest correlation to the best leaders. And emotional intelligence, lots of books. We don't have to go into that, maybe even a course here, but it's about self-awareness, social abilities, it's about self-regulation, things that are innate in your personality and the competencies you have. So I focus a lot on trying to be open, because at times, speed of decisions and leaders, you will at times will want to get things done a little quicker and not bring people along. So you have to be aware of that and understand that. But you have to reflect. You have to be open. And so I do that through, just discussions with people. I try to create safe space where people feel open to tell me when I ask, did I do something wrong? Can I do something better? And then we do a lot of assessments. I hold myself, with a coach to assessments and get feedback in that way so that I can be better. And I've had constant themes over the years that I think I've generally improved on, but sometimes you slip back, and that is, the biggest one for me is sometimes I'll be unclear in my desire to empower people. I won't be clear with the goal that I have, because I feel like if I'm too clear, I'm just asking them to go and execute. I want them to think and strategize. And there's a fine balance there. So it's something I'm usually very tuned into to try to focus on. Your second question was, tell me again, second part of that?
It was about what qualities are essential to your success thus far. That was the third one.
Yeah.
The second one was also about your personal improvement of being a leader since you were younger to now.
Yeah, and
not just now.
Yeah. Well, I think as you grow in your leadership, you have to set vision a little differently, and you have to understand how to engage and engender followership. early on, honestly, coming out of accounting and where I was born and bred, and that was, well, if look in your bank account every Friday, you get paid. That should be enough motivation. That's not how it works, actually. So I think it's how to set a vision and create an environment where people can feel like they can show up their authentic selves and get rewarded and challenged, and creating the structures around that. So that's what I've learned as a leader over time.
And then the qualities.
Qualities, there's a whole bunch. I think it goes to really the emotional intelligence. I think all of you really should think about that as growing leaders if you haven't, and the research is pretty clear, but I would say that it's really about the qualities of self-awareness, having an authentic view of who you are and who you are as a leader, and being true to that. Back to my other conversation, if I was much not a servant leader, and there's plenty of leadership models out there that work. If I was a different leader, I wouldn't work inside of Wawa's ethos and culture. So I think it's trying to learn whatever competencies are authentic to you and building them as part of your leadership profile. And the other thing, focus on your strengths. Weaknesses are never going to become, I shouldn't say that. There might be psychologists in the room. It's hard to make fundamental weaknesses in your who you are become your strength. You can make strengths really outshine and drown out weaknesses. I'd focus on what you're great at and pour your energy into that. Sure.
Another question?
Hey, sir, how are you?
Good.
Quick question. When you were talking before about company culture, and you were saying that you would identify the people leaders and pick them up and take them to another location and facilitate culture, how exactly did you pinpoint those leaders?
Yep.
And how exactly did you maintain that flame when they're dropped into a new spot?
Yeah, so, and those leaders in particular, we're talking about general managers. Really, the target was general managers of a store. So our evaluation process includes financial performance. It also includes people performance. We have quite a few measures on how they are training, developing, and creating a farm system. And so we were looking for the people that scored higher over a period of time on those types of attributes. Additionally, there's some cultural measures that are much more ad hoc, that they're good cultural ambassadors is how I would frame it, much more ad hoc. So in our interview process, we didn't knock people on the head. They had to raise their hand and say, I'm interested. We went through that interview process. We used that data as a guide. So when they arrived here, we wanted to make sure, one, their family was signing up for it, because they're moving a family most of the time. That's a big deal. But then we came down with other leadership structures to support them on their journey. And so what they were doing, really job one, when you showed up 6 months before the first Wawa, your store opened, was you're hiring 60 or 80 people for your store. And so you're using tools, but you're also using everything that you've experienced as a leader running Wawa stores and how to pick the best people to make that customer service culture come to life. Hopefully that answers your question.
We have some amazing Wawa stuff. So last question, and I know Chris has to go back to Philly, unless he wants to stay the night in Miami.
I'd love to stay.
So last question.
First of all, thank you for being here. But
Sure,
from an HR perspective, how can you tell if someone is going to fit into Wawa's culture? Do you look for specific values or in an interview process? Like, how do you know that they'll be able to fit into the culture well and synthesize?
It's a great question, because I've taught culture, so we're not perfect at it. And our culture has an ability, even at the most senior level, to eject people out that we picked wrong. I would boil it down to say, to get a job at Wawa, you go through a lot of interviews. And at times it feels awkward. We just hired a new CFO, and we courted him through the process for about 3 months, which is a risk in an environment where there's others that wanted him. We might lose him, but for us, it's a long-term relationship. That person was relocating his family as well, so I felt an obligation to make sure we got it right for him. But they meet with multiple levels. They actually meet with the people that are going to work for him, in this case, and they have a say. And the question I ask them is, would you follow that person? Is that a leader that you would follow and wake up and want to come to work for based on spending time? And our interviews, I don't know that we're great. We spend a lot of time with people, multiple people. So this board of directors member, the poor guy's going through oodles of different panels of people. His next is meeting with people a couple layers down from management that are not even in the boardroom, that I would say understand our culture the best in really unique ways in the bowels of the organization, and they can give another read on culture. So we have some tools. We do some consultants that know us really well, assess people for different competencies, different styles that are helpful, but it really comes down to face and understanding.
So Chris, I hope you plan to interview quite a lot of our students
I'd love to.
here.
Yes,
And
love
I know we
to.
discussed about the
Yes.
Wawa University, and
Yeah.
hopefully it's going to be headquartered here in Miami.
That would be great.
I'm
We'd get a
sure
lot more
everybody would
interest,
like to
I
come
think.
from Philadelphia to Miami
Thank
to
you. Yes.
study here during the winter.
Yes, yes.
We call it the winter goose.
I like it. A lot of the geese fly south for the winter. We could make this a thing, maybe. So yes, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very
It's been
much for
great.
coming. I appreciate it very
it.
much.
Thank you, Paul.
That was a wonderful
Appreciate it.
conversation.
Thank you.